We can't deny England is a strong country. After centuries of development, it has reached its present status through stable institutions, real strength, and most importantly, capable leadership. Order held, systems endured. Most of the time, the crown worked. However, beneath that surface, there were moments when power went badly wrong. There were kings whose choices pushed the country to the edge of starvation, financial decay, rising crime, and open unrest. These were not accidents. In many cases, the damage came from decisions made at the very top. Hard to grasp the impact in it. That's why in this video, with the support of AI, I take you back to 5 moments when a king's decision almost destroyed England. Stephen, 1135–1154. This is Stephen crowned King of England in December 1135, ruling a country that almost immediately begins to slip from his grasp. Within weeks of his coronation at Westminster, the signs are there. Royal messengers ride out with sealed orders and return with nothing to show. Sheriffs hesitate, bishops delay. Writs that once carried unquestioned authority now stall at town gates. England has a king. But by early 1136, the crown no longer guarantees obedience. To understand how this happens, let's get back to the moment that forces his hand. On December 1st, 1135, King Henry VIII dies. He leaves no surviving legitimate son. Years earlier, many of England's leading men had sworn to accept Henry's daughter Matilda as his heir. But oaths spoken in peace weaken quickly when power is vacant. Succession law is not fixed. Authority depends on recognition, speed, and control. Stephen acts fast. Within weeks, he reaches London, secures the city's backing, gains the support of key church figures, and has himself crowned on December 22nd, 1135. Look from the outside, the choice is logical. Delay would invite rival claims. A crowned king can keep courts open, taxes flowing, and borders guarded. Stability, at least on the surface, demands speed. But speed leaves something unresolved. The legitimacy question is not settled, only postponed. Because the claim is disputed, every command Stephen issues now carries uncertainty. Not open defiance at first, but hesitation. Noble households wait to see which side will prevail. Church leaders hedge their loyalty. Royal justice slows as officials quietly calculate risk. England still appears unified on parchment maps, but real authority has begun to fragment. The countryside feels the change before the court does. By 1137, travel becomes dangerous. Roads that once linked market towns are watched by armed retainers loyal to local lords. Farmers harvest quickly and hide grain instead of storing it. Villages learn to stay silent when unfamiliar banners approach. Loyalty becomes temporary. Survival becomes local. Castles spread across the landscape. Many are raised without royal approval, timber fortifications built in weeks, not years. Each one controls nearby fields, roads, and rivers. The crown's monopoly on force dissolves. Power is no longer issued downward. It is seized outward. In towns, law bends. A theft punished in one shire is ignored in the next. Old feuds return. Coinage circulates unevenly as royal oversight weakens. Markets shrink. Trust, once assumed, becomes a calculation. By 1139, open civil war has taken hold. Matilda lands in England to press her claim. The country fractures into rival zones of control. Battles are frequent, but rarely decisive. Homes are stripped for supplies. Churches shelter families who sleep clothed, ready to flee. Contemporary chroniclers describe burned fields, emptied villages, and a sense that law itself has gone silent. The moment that exposes the crisis comes 2 years later at the Battle of Lincoln. Stephen is defeated and captured. For the first time, the king is removed not by ceremony or agreement, but by force. The crown loses its aura. Authority becomes negotiable. England does not suddenly lack a ruler. but it loses certainty about who can command. From this point, the war grinds on because no side can finish it. Power is too evenly divided. Victory is always partial. Fields lie fallow, not only from destruction, but from doubt over who will own them next season. Exhaustion spreads faster than loyalty. What prevents total collapse is not leadership, it is stalemate. By the early 1150s, pressure builds for settlement. Not because wounds are healed, but because there is little left to take. In 1153, a succession agreement is reached recognizing Henry of Anjou as Stephen's heir. Fighting slows. The country survives, but altered. Stephen's reign does not nearly destroy England through a single disastrous policy. It does something more dangerous. It reveals what happens when the crown loses control and the country learns to live without certainty. England survives this moment, like a body survives heavy blood loss, weakened, cautious, and permanently aware that order is fragile, not guaranteed. Henry VIII, 1509–1547. Stephen showed what happens when the crown loses control by force. This next man shows something quieter, what happens when the crown keeps control by redefining belief. You are looking at Henry VIII, a king whose most dangerous decision does not fill fields with soldiers, but churches with silence. You don't see collapse at first, you hear it hesitate. In parish churches across England, priests pause over familiar words. The rhythm of worship falters. A sentence is skipped. Another is replaced. At the back of the nave, an official stands with a folded paper, not praying, just watching. People notice. They always notice. When sacred language changes, everyone feels it at once. Henry does not enter this moment recklessly. The pressure on the crown is clear. England's stability depends on a secure line of succession. A disputed heir invites future civil war. Negotiation with Rome has failed. Time is no longer neutral. Delay weakens authority. So Henry chooses speed and control over compromise. That choice becomes irreversible in 1534, when the Act of Supremacy places the crown above the church inside England. With that single move, authority shifts. The crown now controls not only law and land, but marriage inheritance oaths and moral permission to resist. Disagreement stops being a matter of conscience. It becomes a measurable risk. The change moves through daily life quietly. In town halls and parish rooms, names are read aloud. Men step forward to swear loyalty to words they did not write. Some hesitate for a breath too long. Silence draws attention. A neighbor watches another neighbor. A clerk copies names carefully, knowing the list itself now carries power. Obedience replaces consent. The most visible loss comes next, and it feels physical. From 1536, religious houses begin to close. Over the following years, more than 800 monasteries, priories, and convents are dissolved across England and Wales. Doors are sealed. Bells are taken down. Ledgers are emptied. Carts roll away, carrying stone, metal, and grain. In many regions, these houses had provided food, shelter, employment, and record-keeping. When they vanish, entire local systems disappear with them. The poor arrive as they always have and are turned away. No sermon explains what replaces this structure. England does not collapse, it becomes brittle. Fear does the rest. People learn to speak carefully. Faith moves indoors. Loyalty becomes performative. The state still functions, but trust drains out of it. What once bound communities together now divides them into watchers and the watched. The pressure breaks into the open in October 1536. In the north, a mass movement forms. This is the Pilgrimage of Grace, and it is not a riot. Contemporary accounts estimate 30,000 to 40,000 people gathering across Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That is not a mob. That is an army drawn from ordinary life. Banners are carried, petitions are written. Priests walk beside craftsmen, farmers, and minor gentry. The movement controls multiple towns and key roads, effectively removing large parts of northern England from immediate royal reach. The crowd does not look criminal. It looks organized, disciplined, moral. That is what makes it dangerous. For a moment, the crown cannot rely on force alone. Crushing a movement of this size risks wider rupture. The state hesitates. Promises are made. Time is bought. When enforcement comes, it is selective and deliberate. Leaders are removed. Fear is restored. England does not break. It adapts. The machine keeps running, but something essential has changed. Faith becomes paperwork. Conscience becomes risk. Authority no longer needs belief, only compliance. Stephen's England shattered because no one could command. Henry's England holds together because command no longer needs consent. Both moments nearly destroy the country, one through open violence, the other through quiet fear. John of England, 1199 to 1216. Early in the 13th century, England had a real chance to break through. The realm was growing richer, its administration more organized, its influence still tied to vast lands across the Channel. But this man dismantled that momentum piece by piece. I'm talking about John of England. When John took the crown in 1199, England is not collapsing. Quite the opposite. The royal government is functional. Sheriffs collect revenue efficiently. Courts operate with growing regularity. England is still connected to a continental empire stretching deep into France. With careful management, the crown could consolidate power, strengthen institutions, and turn wealth into long-term stability. John does not inherit chaos. He inherits pressure, and he responds by squeezing. Within a few years, John loses key continental territories, including Normandy. Prestige collapses. Strategic depth vanishes. With land gone, so is income. Authority once projected across borders shrinks back onto the island. To restore power, John turns to the only lever still fully in his hands: money. War remains the goal. Recovery remains the promise. But now it must be paid for almost entirely from England itself. Campaigns are planned, armies assembled, and again they fail. Yet the cost does not disappear. The bill keeps arriving. Across the countryside, sheriffs return more often than before. Demands are read aloud. Payments are required sooner. Scutage money paid instead of military service is levied repeatedly, sometimes year after year. When coin is short, goods are taken. Livestock, crops, timber. Silence replaces argument, because refusal only raises the price. In manor yards, tenants watch carts roll away heavier than they arrived. Minor lords calculate losses they cannot absorb. Everyone feels the same pressure, but no one sees results. Inside royal administration, the numbers grow darker. Tallies are cut into wood. Parchment lists thicken. Debts accumulate faster than victories. Messengers ride constantly, not with news of success, but with new demands. Money leaves England. Nothing comes back. This is not sudden collapse. It is suffocation. By the early 1210s, resentment hardens. Complaints stop being private. Baronial halls fill with measured conversations. Old rivalries are set aside. What forms is not chaos, but coordination. A shared conclusion takes hold. Extraction has crossed a line. The near-collapse moment arrives in 1215. Armed pressure forces the king to negotiate. Under threat, John agrees to limits on his own power. What becomes known as Magna Carta is not born from reformist vision, but from exhaustion and fear. It is an admission that authority funded only by demand cannot last. For a brief moment, England stands on the edge. A king constrained by force, a nobility aligned against him, a foreign prince invited to press a claim. The system could have shattered. It does not. What prevents collapse is not trust, it is calculation. No side wants the cost of total breakdown. Fear of foreign domination outweighs hatred of the crown. Institutions absorb the shock. The realm bends instead of snapping. England survives but changed. The opportunity of the early 13th century is gone. In its place emerges a hard lesson: power cannot be financed forever without consent. And once loyalty becomes a line item, the crown is already in danger. Charles I, 1625–1649. Now I want you to listen carefully to the sound. A door closes. Iron strikes wood. A sentence is read already decided. A man is dragged forward, not for violence, not for theft, but for refusal. In the 1630s, England learns that crime no longer needs blood. It only needs disobedience. This is the reign of Charles I, and this is where the law turns hard. By the time Charles rules without parliament, the country is not starving. Markets still function. Churches still open. But something sharper moves through daily life. Punishment becomes visible. Fear becomes instructional. Courts do not disappear. They multiply. Special tribunals expand their reach. The Star Chamber and High Commission Court operate without juries. Proceedings are fast. Outcomes are certain. Between the late 1620s and the late 1630s, hundreds are fined, imprisoned, or publicly punished, not for crimes of violence, but for speech belief and refusal to comply. These are not hidden penalties. They are meant to be seen. In one notorious case, a critic of royal policy is fined, heavily branded, and has his ears cut off in public. Crowds gather. Silence follows. The message is precise: the law still exists, but it no longer protects you from the crown. Taxation pushes the pressure further. A levy once reserved for coastal defense is extended inland and normalized. Ship money reaches counties that have never paid it before. By the mid-1630s, tens of thousands of households are assessed. Refusal becomes a test case. When a prominent landowner challenges the tax in court, the judges narrowly side with the king. The ruling is legal. Its effect is devastating. Now the law has spoken against expectation. Collection follows. Sheriffs arrive again and again. Goods are seized. Livestock is taken. Fines accumulate. People comply not because they agree, but because resistance has become expensive. Crime statistics do not spike because disorder rises. They spike because the definition of crime expands. Prisons fill with men who broke no common law. Some are held without clear charges. Others wait months for hearings that will not change the outcome. Word spreads quickly. Legality no longer means fairness. It means permission. The countryside tightens. Conversations shorten. Taverns empty earlier. Sermons lose edge. The fear is not of chaos. It is of precision. By the late 1630s, Charles has ruled without parliament for more than a decade. There is no pressure valve left. Courts answer upward. Councils narrow. Advice turns inward. Authority becomes isolated from reality. When crisis finally forces Parliament back into session, it is not to negotiate. It is to accuse. The country does not explode immediately. It fractures cleanly. Laws are reversed. Courts are dismantled. Accounts are opened. Years of grievance pour out at once. Trust does not return. It cannot. War follows not because England wants chaos, but because the system no longer feels repairable. The end is final and public. In 1649, Charles I is put on trial by his own country. The charges are unprecedented. A king accused of ruling against the law, against the people, against the nation itself. When the sentence is carried out, it is not done in secret. It is performed before witnesses. The crown is removed not by compromise, but by force. This is how his reign ends. Charles shows when law becomes punishment, crime no longer needs intent. And when obedience is enforced without consent, the system does not bend. It breaks. James II, 1685–1688. In the late 17th century, England looks calm on the surface. The government still functions, courts still sit, the army still drills. And yet something fundamental has already failed. This is James II of England, and this collapse begins inside the man himself. James does not come to the throne inexperienced. He has fought wars, he has commanded armies, he has seen his father executed and his brother rule cautiously after years of civil conflict. England expects him to be careful, to protect the settlement that kept the country from tearing itself apart again. James cannot do that. His central problem is not a single policy. It is temperament. He believes authority must be direct, visible, unquestioned. Compromise looks like weakness. Delay feels like surrender. Where others see balance, he sees disorder. From the outside, his actions often appear legal. From the inside, they signal something dangerous. He appoints men the political nation does not trust. He suspends laws by royal will, rather than working through parliament. He insists on open displays of power where restraint had become tradition. None of these moves on their own trigger rebellion. Together, they tell England that the king does not accept limits. People notice immediately. In council chambers, advice shortens. Officials choose safer silence over honest counsel. Meetings still happen, but fewer voices speak. Decisions are carried out without enthusiasm. Loyalty becomes procedural. In towns, proclamations are read without applause. Judges enforce rulings carefully, narrowly aware that credibility is thinning. Clergy soften language. Nobody wants to be the first to confront the crown, but fewer are willing to defend it either. James's personal rigidity worsens the damage. When warned, he doubles down. When isolated, he interprets isolation as disloyalty rather than warning. Each correction attempt pushes him further inward. Power stops flowing outward. It circles tightly around the king. The army, once a symbol of authority, becomes another source of unease. Troops are positioned not to defend borders, but to signal control. Their presence unsettles rather than reassures. England remembers too clearly what standing forces can mean. By 1688, trust has drained far enough that something extraordinary happens quietly. Key figures stop trying to fix the king. They begin planning around him. Letters circulate. Conversations move behind closed doors. The idea of replacement is no longer unthinkable. It feels practical, safer than continued obedience. Loyalty does not flip dramatically. It fades. When an alternative ruler is invited, resistance barely forms. The king still has soldiers. He still has the law. What he no longer has is belief. James hesitates, misreads the moment, then withdraws. Not defeated in battle, not overthrown by mobs, simply left behind. His reign ends without the country tearing itself open. The crown is declared vacant. Authority transfers. A new settlement is formalized. England does not celebrate. It exhales. This is the most unsettling collapse of all five. Stephen lost control through violence. Henry reshaped fear. John drained loyalty through extraction. Charles turned law into punishment. James loses England because he cannot adapt, because his personal refusal to bend makes him incompatible with the system beneath him. The people under his reign do not revolt. They disengage. And England learns its final lesson. A king does not fall when he is challenged. He falls when he becomes unnecessary. 5 Kings. 5 moments where England nearly broke, not from invasion, but from decisions made at the top. Violence, fear, extraction, punishment, and finally, indifference. Each collapse looked different. Each left a scar. And each forced England to redesign how power should work. If you had lived through one of these moments, which failure would have shaken you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this reconstruction helped you see history differently, like, subscribe, and stay with us. Thanks for watching.